Good morning. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Shami Benjamin, and I'm a medical student here at Posan University of Medical Sciences. Prior to becoming a medical student, I served as a senior physician recruiter for a large healthcare organization in the United States, which is why, on behalf of our international chapter of AMSA, or the American Medical Student Association, I'm here today to help you guys learn a few basics about a curriculum vitae and how you can best construct it or edit it to hopefully optimize success when applying for residency, a future career as a physician, or even electives as a student. So let's get started. First things first, what is a CV and how is it different from a resume? Some of the top questions that I've been asked, this is going to be one of them. And let's go ahead and start by talking about what a curriculum vitae really is. So this actually directly translates to course of life, and this document, very aptly named, should track your entire career or training from start to finish. It's relatively static in that once you add something, it typically remains and you continue to build rather than change what's on it, and it varies greatly in length as a result. So as a medical student, you can expect your CV to look very short, anywhere from 1 to 2 pages, typically at maximum. But as you become a seasoned career physician, you actually can see CVs that range anywhere from 10 pages on average, all the way up to 97 pages once for a leadership position that I was hiring for with someone who had spent most of his career in research. That actually is something that's quite feasible. So typically you're going to look for using a CV in areas like residency, fellowships, academic or leadership positions, like executive positions for a company, whereas a resume is usually used for job applications. In contrast, it's extremely dynamic, it's very concise, and it's typically targeted at the position you're going for. It should actually, if it's done well, include elements from the job description that you align with and have information from the company itself. This should be relatively short, between 1 and 2 pages as the general rule of thumb, and only have relevant experience for the position you're applying for, nothing else. That being said, as we progress and talk about some of the elements of a CV, I just want to remind everybody that your CV is constantly evolving. What it looks like today is going to look very different from what it looks like 10 years from now. And make sure that as you remember that everyone's CV will look different, that you shouldn't compare it to anyone else's. In addition, there's no golden standard on what it should look like. This is all just realistically a compilation of some best practices I've picked up from my career. But if you sat down with one of my colleagues, they might have their own opinion on what looks best or the way things should be organized. So make sure that as you embrace the stage you're in and you build the CV to the best of your knowledge using the resources you have, that there are so many resources out there. You can Google different organizations, recruiting firms, agencies, even look at some academic institutions and their advice and find what works for you. One tip is that a CV can always be used to build resumes. So as you compile all of your career information in one document, if you do apply to a short-term position or internship, you can actually just use your CV, pull the relevant information, and use the extra time you've saved to research the company and know really what you're getting yourself into. So now that we've covered some basics and had some simple reminders, let's start on what I think is really important to include and some things that you really shouldn't. What to include? First and foremost at the top of our list is contact information. You'd be surprised at how often I got CVs where I couldn't find their email or a phone number or something I desperately needed, and I had to track one means down with another. Really, really frustrating. So first and foremost, have your name in a really, really prominent spot right at the top of your CV. Include your contact information, including name, email, phone, and sometimes even important to include physical address, especially when reimbursement is included. It's actually a lot easier for the group that's helping you do this. Personal statements, summaries, or objectives can also be found at the top. There are two camps of whether or not you should include a personal statement. Some people say yes, that it's your opportunity to tailor one piece of your CV to the specific opportunity you're applying to. While I agree with that, I think that that's something covered by a cover letter. And so I think that that's something you can typically forego. If you do want to include it, it should be at the top. Next, you want to focus on education. This will be really important for us because they're really interested in what program we're in and what timeline you've got until you graduate. Degrees earned and programs completed, as well as the schools that they were completed at, should be included. You can opt to include your GPA or specific highlighted courses. The only time I really see that that's applicable is going to be if you're focused on a specific element of medicine. So whether that might be a public health focus and you've taken a lot of courses or a minor in public health, or if you're looking to serve a specific community, maybe you took a lot of sociology classes on birth and what midwifery looks like in the United States or the community that you want to serve, that would be really the one point of including something like this after you've been accepted in a medical school. Next, you want to include experience. So any work experience you have, research experience, internships you've served in, and then I'm kind of weird. I like to split volunteer work into two sections of my CV. Anything that's field related and long-term, something substantial. So if it was medically related, I think that that could be included in experience, especially if you held a specific title of leadership. That might be something you want to include in experience. If you have other volunteer work that's not related to the field that you're in or applying for, I think that should be included a little bit later, and I'll touch very briefly on that momentarily. After experience, you want to look at publications and conferences attended, and typically you want to include a few lines about what that means. So if you've attended a conference, what are some of the main things that you participated in? Did you use that time in order to advocate for a specific health issue or attend a specific topic that's of interest to you? Sometimes you want to include that, again, as your CV is shorter. If there's something really important, this is your time to shine. Skills and certifications would follow. That's going to be any active licensure, certifications, any EMR experience. Though EMR experience is absolutely optional to include, if you do know how to work with Epic as well as Cerner or Allscripts or something else and you have varied experience here, sometimes it's nice for an organization to know that you're already familiar with the product that you'll be using. Leadership positions or experience, this is crucial. If you've served on leadership, especially in student organizations, or you've actually gone and pioneered any sort of student group, that's something you want to include here as well. They want to see that you have that sort of initiative. Volunteer work, like I mentioned before, if it's not related to your field, this is a great place to put it. Professional or academic memberships. I think this is really understated, but it's something you're going to see on a lot of seasoned career physicians' CVs, even honestly, residents who got the right advice. There are not very many CVs that I looked at that didn't have at least one or two memberships that they were a part of. So if you're a family medicine physician or you're looking to go to primary care, especially in the States, the the AAFP is really great for you. If you're looking to be a surgeon, maybe the ACS, American College of Surgeons. These are really easy memberships that you can obtain, typically pretty low cost or free. You're looking at $20 or $40 for the entire course of your medical student span. But you can actually use those memberships to get plugged into a lot of different resources, stay up to date on current studies, and really find a community that you can get plugged into that usually hosts conferences, has leadership opportunities within, and helps kind of enrich your career even at the very start. One thing you could add on there if you don't already have it is actually the American Medical Student Association, and I'll give you some tips at the very end of the presentation if you want to get involved. So following that, you would want to add any interests or hobbies. Again, there's no golden standard, and there are two camps on this as to whether or not you should include it. Some people think that it's a little bit not professional to include. I'm on the other side of the camp where I think that when it comes to the program directors that I've worked with and coordinators, and even when you're applying for a position as an attending physician, I love interest or hobby section because one, it tells me that you do something outside of medicine, that you're probably a more well-rounded individual. It also lets me know a little bit of who you are before I talk to you and gives me something to talk to you about. Where this will really serve you in your career and why I think it's absolutely essential is when you're meeting for your interviews for residency, this could lead to a conversation that's much more personable and memorable about you as a candidate, that then if you actually match, or if say it's for electives and you're there for 4 to 6 weeks, you already have a leg up and you have something that you've connected to the program director about that is more memorable and can be used in your letter of recommendation to show that you actually built a reputation and an actual relationship with this person, not that they're doing something because it's part of their duty. So languages or cultural subgroup training can be included here. And then lastly, references. I highly recommend having them on there as long as you've already prepared your references and they know that they can get a call at the time of your submission. It just makes it easier for them to track down if necessary. I know a lot of that is included in some of the programs that you use to apply, but at least have a master document where you have all the information so you don't have to scramble to find it at the time that you submit these. Okay, so there's a quote that I really like I wanted to include, and it's a resume will seldom get you a job offer. A resume will often lose you a job offer. I think that's a great segue into what not to include on your CV. But realistically, it's a great reminder that it's not always, I mean, you're expecting excellence from every applicant that you get. It's when you find something not so excellent that it really stands out. And unfortunately, the really memorable experiences are those that aren't so positive. So that being said, things not to include or to refrain from including in your CV. First and foremost, any photo of yourself or a physical descriptor, I highly recommend you don't touch. Why? Because a lot of organizations you're applying to have very strong anti-discriminatory laws that prevent them from hiring you if they know what you look like before they offer an interview or a position. Typically, it's not necessarily a black and white rule, but what it comes down to is that really uncomfortable gray area that they would like to avoid any sort of lawsuit that they might have in the future by just not interviewing a candidate who submitted their photo. And I can tell you that I've done that in the past. Or what we'll have to do is sometimes you'll be lucky enough to have a recruiter as a middleman. They'll remove your photo before presenting a CV, but you don't want to count on that. And you don't want to add one more reason as to why they won't consider your application. Anything that might be a little bit more volatile or go against the morals of the company or set you up for some sort of really awkward conversation. So sex, political affiliation, religion, don't want to include. Typically, another rule of thumb, I know, especially with those where if you've obtained a work visa or if you're legally allowed to work somewhere because you've gotten a green card and you're now a citizen, it may be tempting to include your social security number. Hopefully you're laughing at this point because realistically it's never a good idea to include your social security number, but I've gotten this on multiple occasions. Definitely don't include this if you can help remembering. Curriculum vitae. Don't put the actual words on your CV. We know that it's a CV. If you want to put CV in the title of your document, great, but don't include it in the actual text itself. It's valuable resource, valuable real estate that you're using that you want to optimize other information with. Don't actually write the words on there. And last but most importantly, no typos. You have unlimited amounts of time to go through and to edit this document. If there's a typo on it, it tells us that you don't care and you didn't put in a lot of effort when you prepared it, so why would they want to put an effort in reviewing your CV? So now that we know what to include and what not to include, let's look at formatting. Few tips that we can look at, typically stick between 10 and 12 point font, something that's readable. So the serif and sans serif font families are really good, pretty solid candidates. I listed a few of them here. If you're unfamiliar, I would open up Word and kind of play around just a little bit. You can also Google other options that people think are great, but you want to keep it readable and easy. Take advantage of natural reading behavior. So people tend to read left to right and top to bottom. So you're looking at the vertical and horizontal toolbar sections of your document. So if there's something really important you want them to see, put it there and they'll see it. That's why you'll see in a lot of CVs on the left-hand side, they'll have dates or titles because that's where they want people to be able to track. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we look at examples. Be strategic about color and clear section headings with larger enhanced font and spacing. So that's really important. Realistically, if you want education separated from volunteer work from everything else, I highly recommend keeping it on the left, setting it apart, and that's where you can be more strategic about color. Some people like the classic black and white. Some will use like a nice navy or something that's not as abrasive just to designate different section headings. There is an example of that later on, we'll see. So chronological ordering of all information, that's a hard and fast rule no matter where you're at. You want most recent information first. I don't care how important it is. If it's out of chronological order, it's really annoying. Then you want to make sure that it's consistent. So whether you're putting spring of some year or the specific month of some year, try to keep the same consistent alignment, information, and format of anything you include. Decrease margin, increase spacing. You want to make it readable and palatable and break apart your information in a way that doesn't scare your reader away. But you also do want to take advantage of the space, especially of your top margin, that could be really valuable for that first 30 seconds that they're glancing at your document. So make sure that you keep in mind that you can decrease some margins to fit some more information in there, as long as you're not overwhelming them with paragraphs. Avoid messy page transitions. If you start some section of a job or a position on one page, you don't want to split it halfway between the first page and then the other half on the top of the second. If you can try and just return a few times so that way it's all together, usually it makes it a little bit easier to read. Make sure to name your file appropriately. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten something that said draft or it had the name of another organization in the actual title of the document, and that definitely puts a bad taste in someone's mouth that's reviewing it. And then again, not my last reminder, but be consistent and avoid typos. Put some time into this document. So let's look at a couple of quick different examples and just point out a few things that I like or don't like just to get your juices flowing. So this isn't a bad one. This is Sally Smith, MD. I think all of these are fake people, and you actually have the sources at the bottom. This one came from the AAFP, American Association of Family Physicians. And so what's nice about it is it's very clear, it's laid out consistently. I see her name right off the bat. And now natural reading pathway, at least me, and maybe for some of you as well, the next thing I see is family medicine residency. I did not look at education and medical training because it was in the center of the page, and my eyes naturally gravitate to name, and then I shoot to the left side and start trailing down. Not necessarily bad. There's some nice demarcations here with those lines that separate the section headings. So it's not something you can't recover from. Just be aware that I'm going to have to now backtrack to figure out each section and go from there, right? So hopefully if that worked for you as well, you kind of get some insight into that natural reading pathway. But overall, really well laid out. This is just the first part of her CV. You can see the dates on the right-hand side, so I'm not wondering about timelines. Overall, really clear, really concise, exactly what you need. I mentioned strategic color usage before, and so this is an example of that. Now again, that reading pathway going from top to bottom, left to right, I do look at Christopher Annan here, and then the next thing I'm looking at is professional profile, professional experience, education certificates. So they did a really great job of drawing attention to these headers, again, with that larger font, capital letters, really nice use of it. It doesn't look like you're screaming, it just looks like you're making it really clear. And then they actually made it so that I can look at professional experience, and without reading a thing, I know there's 3 positions because they're highlighted in that nice blue. So again, no golden standard. If you hate this, it's okay. If you like it, just giving you some ideas of what to include. There are some pretty big blocks of text. They did use bullets to try to break that up a little bit. I'm personally not a huge fan of having indentations like this quite so much, but it's really up to you on that. I like to keep everything left aligned and easy to digest. But what's great here is, again, everything's laid out. It's all relatively consistent. And what you can see in the top is their contact information, easy to find. What I would highly recommend not doing here is you see that the dates are aligned with the left-hand side, but it varies in the position of the dates. I highly recommend keeping that either all the way to the right or all the way to the left on a new line. So if you're looking for chronological order, you're not giving anyone a task to find that. Looking at the later portions of someone else's CV, just to give you an idea of some other options again. On the left-hand side, you see the dates bolded. You also see really strong headlines, which is great. So these headings are great to separate between education, professional development, affiliations, additional info. They put references available on request. That's very common, totally appropriate if you so choose, but really just gives you a nice outline of how somebody else can format their CV. What's really, I think, stands out to me is they use bolding pretty generously, let's say, on the left-hand side. And so that kind of upsets my reading pathway because then I'm actually switching between headings and then also some of the subheading information, just something to be cognizant of, to use italices and bolding and underlining in a way that's strategic. Another really good one, and this is just to kind of really take home the fact that you can have a lot of information in a CV, but what's nice is though there's a lot of text here, I'm still looking at the name right at the top. I can see all the headings on the left. The lines are really helpful in showing me that there's sections, and then all the dates are on the right-hand side. So despite the fact that there's a lot of information included, I have bolded opportunities and I have great headings and a great organization to where I can actually track to what I need and then only read the pertinent information for what I'm looking for. One other thing to notice is at the top, you actually have a lot of white space because they didn't alter their margin at the top. That whole space could have been used to more prominently display their name, or you could have shifted everything up to fit a little bit different information on here. And so it's kind of just a waste of space, and it's a nice visual way to see that. And then the last example I want to look at, with a lot of templates nowadays that you have at your disposal, sometimes it can be done very tastefully. Again, this is all up to you and your personal preference. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, and you know, that's going to change depending on what your personal preferences are. But here, what's nice is that, again, she's taking advantage of that natural reading pathway. So you see her name right off the bat. I'm looking at Sophia, and then I track down on the left, and I see profile, work experience, education, skills, and volunteering. So I know exactly what I'm looking at with maybe a 4-second investment. So even with a short attention span, she's getting her point across, and everything's neatly organized for me to delve into if necessary. Now that you've seen a couple of CVs and you know some do's and don'ts, you've seen some in practice, and again, you can Google countless countless examples of this, and I highly recommend spending 30 to 60 minutes at minimum looking at other people's CVs as inspiration before you write yours. Now let's talk about cover letters, just real briefly. Some people ask whether or not they're necessary, and I think that they're an absolute must. This is where you get to showcase that you've actually done your research about an organization, the opportunity that they have, and you get to highlight specifically how you're the best fit for that. This to me, and I'll tell you, out of all the applications I got, only about 10% of attending physicians attached a cover letter, but those physicians who did got more of my attention because I knew they put the extra work in to be seen. So I put a little extra work in to see them and to make sure I was hearing what they were saying. It's not anything we do maliciously or non-maliciously. It's just we're all really busy and you tend to put attention where attention is demanded. So this is one way to do that. Now, in your cover letter, a couple of really basic things. Be you, be personable, be concise. If it's a whole block of text with no breaks, it's harder for us to stay focused and read through them. But realistically, if you can engage us right off the bat, we'll be more likely to do it. But what you want to do is focus on 2 or 3 things you want to get across. Have an outline before you start, and then make sure you really drive those points home. If you use half a page and you do it well, it's going to be far better than using the full page to repeat information we have in your CV to then drown out what your main points are. So keep that in mind. Stay specific. Avoid what could be written by anyone. I want to read your cover letter and see a little bit of who you are, hear a little bit of your voice. And if I don't, then you didn't do what you could have done with this document. Avoid cliches, brie, or profanity. And in addition to rhyming, that's actually really true. Cliches are super annoying, and you can only imagine that if you've thought of it, someone else probably has, and program directors and coordinators are seeing these over and over again. Don't be too cheesy. Don't swear. There are a few times that I've seen profanity be used, and it actually ended up in like the desired effect of being eye-catching and witty and clever. But in the overwhelming amount of cases, you're actually going to put off the reader. Even if I've had program directors who are a little bit more crass in their personal life, and when they get a letter and they look at it, they're just like, you know what? At the end of the day, this was an inappropriate time. You don't have an established relationship. Don't do it. Be professional, eliminate typos. I think this is the last time I say it, but I really wanted to drive that point home. Take the time you need to edit this document appropriately to make sure that there is not a mistake found. Don't include the stories of others. If you're talking about something that inspires you to pursue this position or this specialty, make sure that you're focusing on your impact and how that has changed you as a person. Don't spend half of your cover letter talking about somebody else. That's not who they want to know about. And it's really, really tempting to get into the details to show that, you know, how impactful this was to you. Don't do that. Tell them how it was instead. Address the recipient. Do your research. Don't put to whom it may concern. If you could easily Google who it is that you're concerning, realistically, you can find program coordinators and program directors' names online pretty easily with a couple of minutes in Google. Make sure that you do that. And more importantly than all of this, convey your interest to the specific position, organization, or location in this time. You want it to be opportunity specific and location specific because typically speaking, if they're investing in you as a resident, and this is why I push that you should show as much of your personality as possible, they're committing to you for 3 to 5 years typically. That's not a short amount of time. They want to make sure that you're somebody that they want to work with. And if they're investing that time into you, a lot of organizations will want to hire on their residents, at least the good ones that are happy and show initiative and do a great job in that time. And so show why that location matters and that there's a chance that this is a long-term partnership because they don't want to put in 5 years to someone who's just there to check off a box and leave. So if you can, I'd say spend 30 to 60 minutes at minimum. Look up the mission, vision, values of the organization you're joining and the position itself, and then try and tailor your cover letter to that position to just highlight, you know, if there's 2 or 3 things that really matter to you. If they're an organization that likes charitable giving or values serving the underserved, and that's something that's really important to you as well, highlight it. This is your shot to do that. Make sure to read your cover letter out loud. Make sure to read it to multiple people and get their feedback. Take their feedback gracefully so that they're honest with you because you want this to be a really constructive process and you want to get everything awkward or poorly written or typos or just things that shouldn't be in there. You want to get that all groomed out during this process and not after the fact. You don't want to spoil your one shot. Solicit advice from connections when appropriate. If you know a program director or a seasoned physician or someone in the generation of which you are supplying this letter to, ask them for their advice. Don't waste space on what's already covered in your CV. I know we've touched on this, but if you are just using your cover letter to elaborate on the things that you've accomplished, you're not using it to its potential because they have a document literally behind it that tells them exactly that. One thing that should go without saying is match the margins or font style of your CV to your cover letter. You want this to be uniform, and I even highly recommend having page numbers that attach everything all together, or using a header or footer with your name or some identifying characteristic so that if they print this out, they can easily make sure that they're both connected. And then there's something that we refer to as the 30-second rule. It's a rule of thumb that you assume you only have 30 seconds to catch their attention and keep it in regards to your candidacy. So you want to get to the point in your cover letter. You want to make sure that everything's well laid out and that you're not making them work to figure out who you are, because that's how they're judging this position and whether or not you're a fit. Make their life easier, and in the end, you'll have a better shot at keeping their attention and maybe scoring an interview. So in summary, there's no right way to write your CV. Realistically, again, there's no golden standard. This is just advice to optimize the delivery of who you are and why you should be considered. So take advantage of it. But also remember that your CV is a representation of who you are right now. Have realistic expectations of what your CV is going to look like. Avoid comparing yourself to others, especially those in different stages of their career. Avoid mistakes at all costs. If there's a typo in your CV, I'm going to haunt you for the rest of your career. And then don't lie about the details you include, especially when it comes to interests, hobbies, volunteer work, or anything else, because they'll have a tendency to ask you about them just to verify the validity, and two, to find some common ground to really bond on. And so if you're not being honest about that, that's going to come back to bite you in the butt, and it's not something that's easily washed away. And then make sure to update your CV often. Sometimes something is more pertinent, or you remember a lot more key information while it's fresh. You don't want to wait too long and then rush to update your CV and have forgotten about something you could have or should have included. You also want to make sure that you're replacing information that you don't think is as necessary to where you're at and where you're heading, and you're replacing it with information that is. So make sure to make your life a little bit easier. Have a good rule of thumb of at least every 6 months updating your CV, even when you don't need to, so that when the time comes and you need it, it's quick and easy to review, skim, tweak, and submit. So hopefully that was helpful. If you guys have any questions or you need further assistance, you feel free to reach out to us. But for those of you who are AMSA members or who are looking to become one, our AMSA members at POOMS are actually entitled to get some free one-on-one assistance with their CV. All we need from you is a draft, and you can send that to us at amsacvhelp@gmail.com. If you are an AMSA member, great, take advantage, send us an email. If you're not and you want to become one to take advantage of this or some of our other opportunities, all you have to do is go to amsa.org, so AMSA.org. We actually have a discount code that's valid right now for those who are trying to join. So it brings the membership cost down from like 60 something bucks down to like 40 or 30, I think. I really should have probably looked that up before this, but 40 bucks is going to cover your entire medical student career. For those of you who are in the 6MD program, you can still get the 4-year membership. And then as you reach the end of your 4 years, you actually reach out to AMSA and their support team will extend it for no extra cost. So it's the same whether you're 6MD or 4MD. Again, that active discount code, it's iTrustee, so ITRUSTE. Go ahead and sign up. And then as soon as you're a member, if you do need some help with your CV, again, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I hope you guys have an amazing day, and thanks so much for joining. I hope this was helpful, and talk to you soon.